Thank you so much, Reza, for doing this for us. It's a very quick intro from me. And if you have any questions, please use the message window to type the questions. And me and James Tales, we both will be monitoring the questions. And whenever Reza can get a chance, he will answer the questions. And I kindly request everyone to please be on the mute. And you can either use message window, or probably at the very end, we could probably use the direct questions as well, but I think we appreciate if we actually use the message window. And the other thing is that this is our first Teams online virtual one, so we are hoping, fingers crossed, everything goes well. But if there is anything, please cooperate, and we are learning, and we all learn it together. And I really hope all of you are doing well. I should have started with that, but yeah, never mind. So, Reza, are we good to go?
Okay. Let me know if you see my screen.
Yes, I can see your screen. I see your slides, and
okay.
There you go. All right. Thank you so much, Reza. I'll let you do the proper introduction.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
I'll just bring the voice a little bit down. Okay. Right. Thank you, Prati, and thank you, James, for organizing this. Really appreciating the opportunity here. Thank you, everyone, for joining at this time of the day. I reckon it's kind of part of your working hours, so thank you for joining this. This session is about Dataflow versus Dataset, two important components of Power BI and how they are helpful in building a development architecture for Power BI. A little bit about me. I have been actually in London Power BI user group. I think it was a year ago, a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago. I don't really have a good memory on that, but had a session on row-level security. I remember that time with Layla. She had a session on one of the AI functions, I believe. I'm based in New Zealand, and I used to travel around the world before this COVID-19, so changed things a little bit. These days, I'm mainly sitting at home doing a lot of remote consulting and training. I'm working at Red Hat. We have a lot of contents in our website for free in our blog, which we have weekly articles, multiple articles a week, and our YouTube channel, a lot of free materials over there. I'm author of some Power BI books. Some of them you can download it from our website. Power BI from Rookie to Rockstar is one of those. And these are my contact information down in the slide deck here. I'll make sure that I send these slides to the organizers, and they will share it with you. Okay, now let's jump into the topic. I guess this would be probably around 45 minutes, 50 minutes session, and we'll see how much questions we'll get through this. If you have any questions, feel free to put it in a chat window, just type it over there, and I'll have a couple of spots in the middle of the sessions that I'll be going and checking those questions, and a little bit longer slot at the end for Q&A. So talking about architecture for a Power BI implementation, you have to think about it in a different persona as that people are going to use Power BI. When Power BI first came in, it was designed for a business analyst, 2015, 2016. It was designed for a business analyst, for someone who is the single report developer, let's say, in a team, in a company. Has one reporting solution to develop and might have multiple users, of course, right? But he or she is the only person building the report, right? One Power BI solution we are talking about mainly. In this kind of scenarios, Power BI works really simple, right? I can use, if I am that business analyst, I can use Power BI desktop. I can get data from any data sources I want, do some data transformation through Power Query, load it into Power BI, create relationship in the data model, write some DAX expressions, visualize it, all within Power BI desktop, within one file. After building my solution, I publish it to the website, share it through one of the methods of like workspaces, apps, and things like that with my end users. Later on, whenever I want to maintain this solution, whenever I want to update or change anything in my code, I just open that PBIX file, apply my changes, save it again, publish it, and everything just works fine, right? It's easy to maintain, it's agile, it's fast to develop. One single file, everything within that, right? This method is good for like a persona of one business analyst in a team, but however, it's not really good option for multiple developers. A scenario that you have like 2, 3 different business analysts, you have something like a BI team or business analyst team, and they might have more than one problem to solve, right? There are lots of challenges in a single file scenario for that kind of usage. Here, only a few of these challenges I talked about. Like, for example, if you have multiple developers working at the same PBIX file, how they can really contribute. Like if I want to build a Power BI report and then share the development work with James, for example, I have to build my changes. I have to make my changes in Power BI file, save it, send it to James. James makes his changes and save it, send it back to me. If in the middle of these, we both make some changes and save it, then we have 2 different versions, totally different versions, which is not ideal, right? Right now, we don't really have a good tool or good built-in way to merge these changes into one file, right? So it creates a lot of problems working with multiple developers. It also brings a lot of other challenges if we do everything in one file. Our file gradually grows bigger and bigger. You start with 20 tables, then 30 tables, 50 tables, 100 tables. More tables you add, more relationships, more complexity in the model, more data, performance reduction. You'll have a lot of pages of visualizations, hundreds of thousands of visualization, and I mean hundreds or thousands of measures, DAX measures. Every time you open the file, it takes minutes to bring it up. Every time you want to edit a measure, create a new measure, it takes a lot of time, right? It would be really problematic to work in such an environment with a single file, right? These are only a few of those problems. So you end up with usually multiple files, and even one single developer sometimes ends up with multiple files because that might be 2, 3 different Power BI solutions to implement. Now let's talk about one of these challenges. Let's say you want to use one table in multiple files. I call it a query because in Power Query we call tables a query, right? So let's say you want to use a query or a table in multiple files. Assume this scenario. Let's say I am a business analyst. I've been building a report for the sales team in the past 2-3 months. And I've built that report. I've brought some tables in it, customer table, product table, sales transaction table, date table, and some other tables. I built the Power BI report, calculations, everything, and the sales team are really happy with that. Now they are using it. And somehow the warehouse management team, they also heard that I've done such a report. They came to me and asked me, okay, can you also build a report for us about inventory? I say, yep, why not? Now, the thing is that if I'm going to build the inventory report, it's like totally different subject area. It might have some relationship with sales, but in fact, it is totally different, right? The sales team might not even like to have the inventory team to see part of that data, right? So I will start with, let's say, a new Power BI file I call it inventory PBIX file. And I start building that, getting data from different places, doing some data transformation, calculations, things like that. Now, the problem with this is that in this inventory Power BI file, I have, of course, some new tables like inventory movement or warehouse, things like that. But I also have some tables that I had it before in the sales table, in the sales PBIX file. For example, product table. I had a product table already in the sales PBIX file, and that product table, I actually spent a lot of time to build it. I merged it with product category, I flattened that table, I cleaned up the data, some duplicates, I removed all of those. So I spent a lot of time to build that table the way it is, right? Or another example of a common table is a date table. Date table is something that usually you use in any Power BI file, most of the Power BI file, right? So I need those tables also in my inventory Power BI file. So how am I going to build that? Am I going to build all of those transformations again? Of course not, right? I can go to my first Power BI file, the sales PBIX, copy those scripts, Power Query scripts, M scripts, and paste it into the new Power BI file, the inventory Power BI file, and problem solved, right? As long as I have the access to the same source, that M script would generate exactly the same output in the inventory Power BI file, right? But then this is not really a problem solved scenario. This is even bringing another problem. Because right now I have two different versions of the source code. If I'm building my date table with, let's say, 20 lines of transformations, now that 20 lines of transformation, that source code is in sales PBIX file and in inventory PBIX file, right? I have it in two different places. What is the problem about that? The problem is that later on in, let's say, a couple of weeks, in a month's time, let's say, I go and change something in the sales PBIX file in that date table. I add a couple of transformation or remove a couple of transformation. Then I have to also remember that I have it also in the inventory Power BI file, so I should go and change it over there, right? And this is only two files. What if I have 3 files, 4 files, 10 files, right? It makes it really hard to maintain such a solution because my source code is everywhere, right? You should have like one single version of the source code. Whenever you change it, everywhere you'll see the impact of that change. That is one problem. Another problem is that it's not just the source code that is spread everywhere. It is the actual transformation that is happening again and again. If I have a product table that is built and let's say the transformation for that, it is taking at least a little time, right? And now I'm doing that transformation once in the sales PBIX file, once in the inventory PBIX file, once in another PBIX file. I'm transforming that again and again. I should just transform it once and reuse it. I should not be doing that again and again, right? So these problems, challenges like these can be solved with something called Dataflow. Dataflow is not just a concept for Power BI, it is also a concept for Power Platform, Power Apps, but in this session we are mainly focusing on Power BI part of it. You might have heard about Dataflow, but in case you haven't, I'm just going briefly into what Dataflow is. Dataflow is a Power Query process that runs in cloud, independent from Power BI report or dataset or any other Power BI objects. The main important part of this definition is being independent, because if you build a normal Power BI report in Power BI desktop, you are using Power Query to build your Power BI file, right? And when you publish it to the service, when you schedule it to refresh, you are having Power Query running in cloud, right? So Power Query running in cloud is not something new, right? That is already part of your dataset anyway. The Power Query that runs in cloud and it is independent from Power BI report, that is Dataflow. What I mean by independent from Power BI report, I mean that the result of this process is not stored in the in-memory structure of Power BI. It is stored somewhere else. Now, where this is stored, if it is not part of Power BI, where it is stored right now, the storage option for Power BI Dataflow is Azure Data Lake. That is the only option at the moment for Power BI Dataflows. There are some discussions later on, other types of destinations would be available, but for now, this is the only destination. Data is stored as CSV formats in different folders. There's a folder structure for that, but it is in Azure Data Lake storage. Now, do you need to have a Azure subscription to use it? No. Even if you don't have Azure Data Lake subscription, or you don't even have Azure subscription, or you don't even touched Azure before, you can still use this feature, because when you have a Power BI Pro account or a premium account, you are actually having a bit of space in your Power BI account. Like Pro account has 10 gigabytes of space. Part of that space can be your internal Azure Data Lake subscription, which is part of the Dataflow. However, if you have Data Lake subscription separately, you can connect it to Power BI, and that is called external data flows, which we are not talking about that details of those. This is not a session about data flow in itself. It is more about the architecture of that. So I'll skip some of the details like that. Okay, you have Power BI Dataflow, runs in cloud, stores the data as a CSV format in Azure Data Lake. Now what? You can use the result of that in Power BI. In Power BI Desktop, you can get data from that transformed data in the Dataflow, in the Power BI Dataflow, from that CSV files that are in Azure Data Lake, right? So what is the point of all of these? How this can help in a scenario that I explained before? This is the same scenario, right? I have sales Power BI file, inventory Power BI file. Now, the good thing about this is that if I have date dimension, date table, product table, any of those tables that I think I might need in multiple files, I can process them through a data flow. So that will do some transformations, load it in CSV format inside Azure Data Lake. Then in these files, or any other files, it might be 10 other files as well, I just get data from there. The good thing is that I will have only one single version of the source code in the data flow. Whenever I want to go and change it, I just go there and make my changes. I also have one transformation done only, right? Date dimension is only transformed once, ready for all the other Power BI files to go and get it, right? So much more efficient and much easier to maintain. There are other benefits for data flows. I'm just showing you a couple of those here as well. One other benefit is to have a faster refresh time, because if you do all of your heavy lifting transformation in Power BI, in Power Query, in Power BI Desktop itself, your refresh time will be longer and longer. Versus if you have your heavy lifting transformation in the data flow, and then Power BI just get the final result. It's just a load process in Power BI. Your Power BI refresh time would be shorter. However, the overall refresh time is the same, right? So I'm not talking about reducing the overall refresh time this way. I'm just talking about it would help to reduce your Power BI Desktop refresh time, because then it helps you to have a faster development time, right? Another benefit of this, not every business, every company has the luxury of having a data warehouse either on Azure SQL database or on SQL Server on-prem, or they don't have the luxury of having an ETL tool like SSIS, like Informatica, or things like that, right? These are usually components that large enterprises are using it because of the licensing costs, because of the tools that needed, because of the skill set that it needs for developing it. You can achieve the same thing with data flows. You don't really need any extra tools. You don't really need any other licensing or anything like that. With data flows, you can actually build your data warehouse style tables through one or multiple data flows. You can process tables the way that you want in a star schema way, like fact tables, dimension tables. It would be sitting inside Azure Data Lake, but still that is considered a data warehouse, right? It is a central place that your Power BI reports can go and get data from there, right? So let me show you a demo of Dataflow, and then I'll check if there's any questions for this section. Now, Dataflow is a service-only object. It is a website-only object. You cannot create a Dataflow in the desktop, at least not now. And you cannot create it under My Workspace. You can go to any of the organizational workspace. Here I go to this one. There is an option here that you can say new and then a data flow. That's how you create a data flow, right? So I can create a data flow like this. Now, data flow can be created in different ways, many different ways. As I said, we are skipping some of the details. I'm starting a simple one, define new entities. Entities basically are tables. So add new entity. This window that is coming up just right now is very similar to Power Query in Power BI Desktop. When you say get data, you see most of these sources. I can choose any of these sources, do some configuration about that, and then continue. Let's say I can select SQL Server database, add the server name database. If it is on-prem server, then I specify the on-prem gateway and things like that. Now, in this example, I'm using a different one, however. Now, let's talk about this specific example I want to show you. Here, I have a Power BI file. It is my sales data mart, actually. I have like 3 tables, the sales table, customer table, product table. Now, I want to also bring a date table. Consider me in this example as a data modeler. I'm a data modeler. I have no idea how to build a date table. And I'm not going to use the built-in date table in Power BI. There's a built-in date table in Power BI. I'm not going to use that, let's say, because I want my fiscal columns. I want the specific calendar days that I want, which I cannot access those through the built-in date table. So I need to have my own version of date table. However, I don't really know how to create a date table, right? Now, on the other hand side, let's say the data engineer, the ETL developer, the data transformation developer is someone who already knows how to build a date table. Now I have a script, a Power Query script that builds a date table, and this is fully available in my blog. You can go and download it. This just builds a date table like that. Now I can copy it and come here and paste it as a blank query. This will give me a date table, but that would create the problem of having my source code within this Power BI file, which I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do that instead is I'll go to the Dataflow, start with a blank query because I have already the query. And then I just paste that query over here, right? This is a quite flexible date dimension script that I can say start from this year to this year. This is my start of fiscal year, all of those things like that, right? I can configure everything and then build it. And I don't really need any on-prem gateway or anything like that because this is not really sourced from anywhere, right? I click on next. And this will bring the Power Query editor for me here, which has all the columns, all the transformations listed here. I can even add more transformations if I want to here. There are lots of transformations options here, very similar to Power Query editor in Power BI Desktop, right? I can have multiple tables in this environment. Every data flow can have multiple tables if you want. I'm going to call this table date. And for this example, we are going to just have one table over here. Save and close. I'm going to call this Dataflow London Pod Dataflow. A data flow can be scheduled to refresh, and that is what usually normally you do. You schedule it to refresh based on a specific requirement you have. However, for this example, I'm just doing it manually. So what did I call it? I think I called it London. Yep, here it is. So I'm going to refresh it now. Now, while that is refreshing, I'm getting back here, right? Remember, this is now the persona of that data modeler. I have no idea how to build a date table, but I've heard that there is a date table, there is a date dimension available for me if I go and access it through Dataflow. So how I can do that? I can go get data, and I choose Power BI Dataflows, right? I can access the result of whatever is processed in a data flow as long as I have access to that data flow. The way that you share data flow is you actually give users access to that workspace. Even a view access would give them access to a data flow. So here, this is the workspace that I had that data flow in it. If I go further down, this is London Pag data flow. I'll expand that. And here is my date table. Right? I click on it, it shows me a preview of that data. So for me, as a data modeler, without even knowing how a table like this is generated, what is a script to create something like that, I just click on the checkbox and I load it into Power BI. That layer of transformation is totally abstract from me. I just load it and create the relationship, write whatever DAX calculations I want, build any visualization that I need, and then use it in building my report. The data transformation layer of the solution is totally separated, decoupled from the rest of the model, which is the modeling and the visualization. That is the good thing about Dataflow. And another good thing is that now if I want to use this date table anywhere else, I just open another Power BI file, I just do get data from there. The data transformation is only done once in here, based on the scheduler, of course, but I can reuse it. Whenever I want to change this table, I just come here to the data flow and edit it over there, right? I have a solution that is easy to maintain, one single version of the source code, transformed only once instead of transforming it again and again and again, abstracted from the rest of the model. I can have easily a Power Query developer, a data flow developer to come and develop this while I have a data modeler or report builder to build the rest of the solution. These are good things about Dataflow. Now the next section is going to be about Dataset and then how to use these together. But before going there, let me check, is there any questions? Okay, I see a question from Charlie. Is generating a date table in Power Query better than doing it in DAX? Does it make reports faster? We find DAX date table a performance killer. Not that much, I say, because doesn't matter you created in DAX or you created in M or Power Query. This is happening at the refresh time of your Power BI report. It doesn't happen runtime, and refresh time usually is not a big problem. However, saying that, I prefer to create it in Power Query because of many reasons. One of the reasons is that if I do it in Power Query, I can also bring public holidays in it. I can connect to a website, get some information like that, like public holidays and things like that, where I cannot do these things in DAX. Another good thing is I can build it through a data flow. I cannot build a DAX date table through Dataflow, right? So because of these, I personally prefer the Power Query approach. Another question from Leon. Data warehouse, how does this work? Doesn't each subsequent refresh override the data flow previous refresh result? It does, however, you can implement incremental refresh. So in here or any other data flows, you can actually go and set up the incremental refresh for a data flow similar to the way that incremental refresh to the dataset works. A question from Darren. In the past, I would have limited the date table according to the min-max date in my fact table. How would you handle this with a date table created in the Dataflow? That would be also possible, because in your Dataflow, you can also have access to your fact table and get the minimum, get the maximum, and build your date table in that period. That is also possible. You have seen that in Dataflow, you can access any data sources you want. Okay, I'll take one more question and then we'll continue. We'll reserve the rest for the next part. Charlie asking, can you reuse the date table for multiple date fields, created, updated, etc.? Yes, of course, there is like, let's say, pattern for that called role-playing dimension. And for that, you can basically create a copy of that date table, or you can get data from that date table again. Easier would be just here a new table, which would be just copy of that date table, and then create relationship to here. Okay, just this one very quick one. Can Dataflow be used across multiple workspaces? Yes. Let's say if I have a Dataflow build in this workspace, right, in this workspace, I can build a report getting data from the Dataflow in this workspace, but the report itself to be published in another workspace, right? So I'm using in another workspace the Dataflow that is coming from this workspace. It is absolutely possible. Okay, I'll keep the rest of the questions for after the next part. We'll have a lot of time at the end to go through these anyway. So let's continue on this. Going back to slides. Okay, you heard about data flows in the first part. Now, another part is dataset. What is a dataset? And first, it is important to know about dataset because it is not a concept that you normally see. It's a little bit like behind the scene of Power BI. When you have a Power BI file open in a Power BI desktop, if you go to Task Manager of your machine, and if you right-click, go to Task Manager or whatever, you can find that under Power BI Desktop thread, there is a task for Microsoft SQL Server Analysis Services. Even if you don't have it installed on your machine, because Power BI Desktop installs that, you will have this Microsoft SQL Server Analysis Services running. This is a tabular version of SQL Server Analysis Services. This is a place that we have the data, tables, columns, rows, all the actual data cells, relationship of these tables together, calculations, DAX expressions, connection to the data source, everything in terms of data is there. That is what we call a data set. A report, however, is all the visualization on top of this. Charts, different types of charts, slicers, pages, all of those, which is connected to this data set. So in fact, we have like two objects, a report and a data set. But in Power BI Desktop, it actually combines everything in one view, and you see everything in one view. You think it is all one object. It is not. It is two objects. You will see this difference when you publish your Power BI file into the service. If you already have published your Power BI file into the service, you have seen that there is a tab for dataset, there is a tab for report. This is the old layout of the Power BI service. By the way, the new layout is slightly different. Dataset has different actions than the report. For example, you can share a report, but for the dataset, you can do things such as schedule it to refresh, or set up the connection for the data source, connect it through gateway, or refresh it now, things like this, right? So that's a dataset. Now that you know the dataset, let's talk about this problem. Let's say if I have multiple report visualizers who want to build a visualization on the same model, same number of tables with their calculations, with DAX expressions. Now I want to build multiple reports, multiple visualizations on top of that. How can I do that? Am I going to create like different copies of that model? No, because that would create, again, the same problem of having multiple copies of the source code, which is not ideal. So how am I going to do that? I'm going to do that using a shared dataset. A shared dataset is a dataset that is used for multiple reports. Default is that every dataset is used to build one report. That is a default, but you can build as many reports you want on top of one dataset and make it a shared dataset. How you can use a dataset as a shared dataset? When you have a dataset in Power BI service, using this little icon beside the dataset actions, you can actually go and build another report on top of it. Or in Power BI desktop, you can say get data from Power BI dataset. Using any of these methods, you are able to build a new report on top of the existing dataset, which makes it a shared dataset. Let me show you that. So I'm going to close this Power BI desktop file. I'm going to open a new one, and also here I'm going to another workspace. In this workspace, I already have some reports, right? One of them is this movies report. I can just open it. It has some visualizations about movies, sales and ratings and things like that. Now I'm going to see what is the dataset for this, and this is how you can see it from the view related. Here you can see that this is a dataset for that. Now, if I use this little icon here, I can go and build another report on top of this dataset. The new report that I'm going to build this way is not going to have a dataset of its own. It's going to connect to this dataset. So one dataset would serve two reports in that way. Or even here in the Power BI desktop, I can do the same thing using get data from Power BI datasets, right? Not Dataflow, dataset this time. When I do that, of course, you need to log in with your account, and then you'll see list of all datasets that you have access to it, which might be even datasets that someone else has created. You will also see an endorsement column here and a specific order. This order shows those that are endorsed as certified first, then those that are endorsed as promoted next, and then all of those that are not endorsed at all. It's just default endorsement. This is the concept of gold report, silver report, gold datasets, let's say silver dataset and bronze. This is a labeling system. You can go and label these based on the reliability of these. Let's say if someone went and built a data set and tested it, made sure that they are good, promoted ones. But then if there's a team of testers who made sure that this data set is very reliable across different types of reports and analysis, they even get it one level higher and make it certified. Those usually comes first, and then these, and then these. Because if I'm a user of this data set, I can pick the one that is like certified, right? I'll show you where we do these certification as well, or endorsement. Now, in this example, I'm going to use this data set. Select that. Consider me as a persona of a report visualizer now. I don't really know how to build the data model, or I don't know how this model is built, what are calculations and things like that, but I know how to build visualization on top of it. I can select this. This will create a live connection to that data set. Here you can see that live connection to that data set. I see those tables over here. I can start doing any visualizations I want. Sales by studio, let's say, or anything like that. As you see, this is Power BI as live connection, so I don't really have those other two tabs of data and model, or I don't have Power Query. I'm just using Power BI for visualization only. Then I can save this in my desktop. Let's call it Movies London, and then publishing. publish it. You can also publish it to another workspace if you like. I'm just publishing it to the same workspace, and once it is published, I'll just open that report. Here you can see that this is that report. I'll go and see view related to see what is the dataset for that, and this is exactly the same dataset used for this report. So now I have two reports using the same dataset. In fact, if I go and check out that dataset, which is this one, in the view related, I see that actually this dataset is used in many other reports. It's not just those two, in a lot of other reports, and even reports in other workspaces, right? What are the good things about this part? The good things about this part is that now I also separated the visualization layer from the modeling layer. Because using the Dataflow, I just separated or decoupled the data transformation layer. Modeling and visualization were together. Now, using this approach, I also separated those two from each other. I can have someone building the data model, someone who is good at DAX and calculations, and someone or more than one person building the visualization, someone who is good at visualization and charts and the concepts of visualization. I can have multiple people working at the same time. It is an easier solution to maintain because my source code is in one place only, and it is multi-developer approach. The next part is going to be an architecture which I explain about how these two works combine with each other. Now we have just a few minutes to go through a few more questions before jumping to the next part as well. Okay, I'll look at the questions in a not really right order, but I just look at these in a way. Okay, there is a discussion going on. I'm not going to talk about that discussion. So one question is that if I create an empty report in Power BI desktop with a query, publish, use Power BI dataset as a source in another report, is that effectively the same as Dataflow? No, dataset is different from Dataflow. A shared dataset is different from Dataflow. And that is what I'm going to talk about in the very next part, which is going to be the last part. I'll explain what are exactly the differences. If we do in Power Query and we have different min and max state depends on our fact table, then how can we bring it in Dataflow? Power Query, Dataflow is using Power Query. You can use Dataflow, which is basically Power Query. Get your fact table, get the minimum value, get the maximum value, build the data table based on that. All of that in Dataflow. You don't really need to do that in Power BI Desktop. You can build it in Power BI Desktop, then copy a script and go and paste it over there in the Dataflow. Okay, I guess we can continue on this. Simon question. Have you found any problems with update? Oh, okay, that is a lot of questions coming from Prati at the same time. Okay, Simon question. Have you found any problems with updating stored procedures in Dataflow when you change the stored procedure? Depends on the change, I say. If the change is a structural change, like changing the columns, it's not actually that many problems, but some of the transformations in Power Query are column dependent, like change type and things like that. For those, you have to redo some of those transformations or do it in a way that is not column dependent. Apart from that, no, there shouldn't be a big problem. Would you use Dataflow for dimensions type of tables only, or would you use it for fact tables that you want to reuse? Of course, for both, for dimension tables and for fact tables. There is no limitation that Dataflow should be used for dimensions. It can be really helpful to build it for fact tables. However, if your fact tables are really huge, then you might need to use powerful compute power or some of the specific features that we have in Power BI Premium. Dataflow itself is not a premium only feature, but if you want to use it in scenarios that you have like huge amount of data, then considering premium would be definitely an option. Okay, because we don't have much time, I'll do the last part and then make sure that we get back to these questions. So the last part, you've heard about Dataflow, you've heard about datasets. Now, how these are working together? What is the architecture that bundles these together? The architecture I'm talking about is a 3-layer architecture. In these 3 layers of architecture, we have the data transformation layer. This is a place that I use Dataflow to get data from different sources, from Oracle, SQL Server, Excel file, SharePoint list, all those places, do the data transformation, load it into Azure data lake storage as my, let's say, central repository or data warehouse or whatever you might call it. The person who builds this layer is a Power Query developer. This person doesn't really need to know anything about DAX or anything about visualization, just Power Query. Then I have a layer of shared dataset, shared data model, whatever you might call it, which is a bunch of data marts, each data mart having a bunch of tables. They can have tables in common, which is not going to be a problem because they are going to get it from Dataflows. The person who builds this should be good at DAX, good at relationships, data modeling in Power BI. And then third layer would be visualization. My report visualizers, those who are good at building really interesting visualizations, they connect live to those using get data from datasets and build Power BI visualizations with that. I will have like 3 different personas of developers working at the same time in this environment. And because these are layered architectures, I can easily replace a layer with something else, with another technology. One of the examples is if I have Excel users, which happen actually quite a lot because one of the big range of users for Power BI are coming from Excel background. They are good at Excel. They can use Analyze in Excel feature of Power BI, which means I can have a live connection to that Power BI dataset. So my visualization layer in that case would be Excel connected to the Power BI dataset. This layer is now replaced with Excel, or it can be Excel and Power BI together. Or in some organizations, you have some limitations. Your board of directors, for some reason, decided that they want to use Tableau, ClickSense, or any other tools rather than Power BI for visualization. Now, those tools are good for visualization, but they are not good for modeling and things like that. You can use Power BI for modeling now and have those tools for visualizing the data, right? That works with the premium feature of Power BI called XMLA endpoint, which those tools can connect to the endpoint of Power BI. So in that case, you'll have your shared dataset built in Power BI, your data flow, but then Tableau or any other tools to do the visualization. Paginated reports are reports that you build it for fine printing and pagination, like page header, page footer, margins on different sides, the specific size of page. You can build that on top of a shared dataset. In fact, your visualization layer can be anything. Because this is like layered architecture, you can have it everything. Or some organizations might decide that their shared dataset layer is going to be Azure Analysis Services. They can easily replace this with Azure Analysis Services, right? So any of these can be replaced with another thing. This multi-layered architecture I'm talking about is not a new architecture. It is actually reusing best practices that we had in other architectures prior than this with Microsoft technologies. These two are a couple of those samples. The one in the left, we used to call it the BI burger. This was like multi-layered architecture, kind of similar to this, different technologies. We had SSIS, we had analysis services, performance point and things like that. Now, in the new age of Power BI, these are replaced with technologies such as Dataflow and Dataset, right? So the whole concept of multi-layered architecture is not new. The tools to do that is new, which are actually Dataflows and Datasets. One of the good things about these technologies like Dataflow and Datasets is that these are not hardcore developer tools. This is not like SSIS. You don't need Visual Studio to build that. This is not like a SQL Server database that you need someone to understand T-SQL scripting to be able to work with that. You can have a normal Power BI user to be able to work with a Dataflow with a dataset. You don't really need any other licenses or any other tools to work with. And still, this is giving you a multi-developer environment. This is giving you the decoupling of layers of visualizations, modeling, and data preparation. It's a reusable pattern, and you will have much easier maintenance approach using this. So to sum up the Dataflow versus Dataset, they both stores data, but they are not replacement of each other. They are complement of each other. Dataflow is your ETL layer, your data transformation layer. This is replacement of your Power Query. The person who builds Dataflow should be a Power Query developer. Dataset is the place that you can also have Power Query, but we reserve that for the Dataflow to keep that separation, right? So try to not do it in the dataset, do it in the Dataflow. But then in the dataset, you can have relationships in your tables, you can have calculations, DAX calculations, and that is where the important part of dataset is your modeling layer. The person who builds this is a person who is good with DAX, with calculations, with relationships. Users of Dataflow are data modelers. Users of datasets are going to be data visualizer, report visualizers, right? Dataflow solves the problem of having one table to be reused in multiple Power BI files. Dataset is solving the problem of having multiple report visualizers want to use one central model, right? They work together to complement each other to build that three-layer architecture that I explained to you, not as a replacement of each other. Now, before getting to the question, everything that I mentioned to you, I have written articles about that in Redicat website. It's free, available over there, and in our YouTube channel as well. I have a Power BI architecture course coming next week in our academy. We have a lot of video courses over there. This part is like only one small part of that course, and we have a lot of other courses. I have here also shared a coupon that you can go and use it to get 1 month free access to our academy membership with this code, but only limited to the first 15 people who use it. Okay, now if there is any questions I missed, I'm more than happy to go.
I've summarized questions which you haven't answered, so I just posted everything there.
Awesome. Thank you. Let me just see. Oh, yeah, perfect. Thank you. So we'll start it from Wells Powell. Why would you have more than one table in a flow or more than one flow? Good question. But like there are different standards to build that. Like one of the reasons I might have more than one table in a data flow is if I have, let's say I'm going to build a generic set of data flows that data flow tables that I think it would be useful for many reporting solutions, like time table and date table. These are like two different tables. People think that they are the same, but time table and date table, or a currency table, things like this that are quite generic. So I might process them all in one data flow, right? Or another reason, why should I have more than one data flow? Of course, for different like solutions, you might have different data flows. You might have a data flow for processing tables of the sales, another data flow for processing tables of something else, right? But separation of this is mainly like standards that you define the governance around it. It's not something that works the same in all companies. They have different approaches. A question, will direct query be integrated into the data flow in the future? Yes, direct query for data flow is coming very soon. I don't know when, but very soon. So watch the space for that. Another question, does the drill down hierarchy function in Visual still works with the date dimension you created in your script? Drill down hierarchy would work as long as you have a hierarchy. Now, the built-in date table comes with its own built-in hierarchy. If I use my own date table, I just need to create that hierarchy myself, right? And as soon as I create that hierarchy, I can have that ability to do the drill down. 3 question, do we need premium license to create data flow? No. That example that I showed you was just with Power BI Pro account. However, if you have premium account, Dataflow will give you some extra features, things such as computed entity, which is when you reference one entity and another, use it in another entity, or linked entity when you get an entity from another data flow used in this data flow, or AI insights, or extra compute power. All of these are coming with the premium license, but it is not that data flow is premium only. It's not like that. Jan asking, can data flow be assisted by Power Pivot? Not right now, but this is also something coming, having the ability to get data from data flows from Excel. That is also coming. Again, I don't know when, hopefully sometime. Charlie, when we are querying our data warehouse in direct query mode to create our data set, yeah, okay, so that we have latest data, does data flow approach effectively mean that we are unable to use live data? It's equivalent to import mode. Yeah, it's going back to the same discussion about direct query. Right now, data flow is import only, but it won't be like that for long. The direct query is coming soon, so you will have the option to do direct query or import. Another question from Sri, can we pass parameters to data flow? Yes, the parameters are quite new to data flow. However, they are still in progress. Right now, parameters in data flow are mostly used internally to create a custom function in Power Query in the data flow. Passing parameters to data flow is still like quite new and under development. Basically, all of the functions that you have in Power Query in Power BI Desktop would be kind of implemented in Power Query in the data flow. Question from Charlie, is there a way to provide subsections of a larger data set so that end user can explore a narrower context of a data? We need larger data set to build our reports, but it will overwhelm users. Good question, Charlie. In Analysis Services Tabular, we have a concept of perspectives. And perspective is exactly what you are talking about. Let's say I have a huge model, but then report visualizer of the sales team only needs to see like 5-10 of these tables. I'm going to create like a perspective of that, and they use that perspective. Unfortunately, that is not yet available in Power BI, but these are things that are coming from Analysis Services to Power BI, and they will be available very soon. Even right now, using the XMLA endpoint read-write, you can somehow build that approach. But to have that as a built-in capabilities, that needs to wait a little bit. Can you bring, question from Stephen, can you bring a data flow to Power BI using a dataset? Can you bring a data flow to Power BI using a dataset? Not sure exactly what you mean, but in a dataset, you can get data from a data flow if you mean that. Lee asking, we have the ability to show last refresh date on a report. If a report developer consumes several data flows, do they have access to the last refresh date of each data flow, or do we need to manually incorporate that into Dataflow M code? Good question. Not through Power BI. Like if I use Power BI Desktop, if I get data from a Dataflow, it doesn't really tell me what was the last time that it has been refreshed. REST API functions and things like that will give me the refresh history, but you don't have access to those REST API functions in Power BI unless you use a specific PowerShell connector. It's a third-party connector created to do that. That's one way. Another way, which would be the easier, is that one that you mentioned, that you manually create a M code that gives you the latest refresh time as part of your data flow, and then you use it in your tables, in your reports, to say that this data flow table is refreshed at this time. Okay, how Dataflow built? Is it part of Pro or Premium? We already talked about that. What are limitations? Okay, yep, we talked about that. Fiona asking, am I right in thinking that you can only load existing dataset into an empty report? Can you add other datasets, reports containing existing? This question is more about having composite mode with live connected dataset. Right now, if I have a Power BI dataset if I have a Power BI report connected to a Power BI dataset, that is considered as a live connection. I can only have one data source as a live connection right now. But there's an ability called composite mode on live connection. This is not available right now. It is coming soon based on the documentation in Microsoft release notes. It is going to be October, hopefully, and that time then you would be able to do that. Do data flows work with CDS? Not Power BI data flows, but Power Platform data flows. Power Platform data flows are data flows that you build through Power Apps. It is kind of the same concept, but built in different place. And they will be able to write into CDS. You will have actually the option to say write it into CDS or write it into the Azure Data Lake, which brings the concept of like standard data flows, those that are written into CDS, or analytical data flows, which are those that are written into Azure Data Lake. Does Dataflows have a history of versions so you can have rollback? Unfortunately, Power BI is not really powerful these days for version control. Like there are some workarounds and things like that. All of those, however, are like third-party options. I hope Power BI comes with a version control at some point, but right now, no, unfortunately. What you can do, however, is that every data flow has a JSON file. Let me just show it to you here. Like if I have a data flow here, I'll go to that workspace. Any of these data flows, I can go to that data flow and export .json. This is the metadata of that data flow. If I export this JSON file and keep it in a place, later on, if for some reason I remove it, I actually lost this, or I want to get back to this, I can just build a data flow with this JSON file. That would be our best option for now. Okay, Oscar saying that in built data flow, I built the data flow, then connected to Power BI Desktop to develop some reports. But when I published it to the Power BI server, gateway does not recognize the data source. I have tried many things. I could never get it to work. It's more kind of a gateway question. The thing is that there is a difference between developing Power BI data flows compared to developing a Power BI desktop solution. When you build a Power BI desktop solution, if your source is on-prem, you would be able to continue your development without needing the gateway. Everything would just work fine. You can even publish your solution up to the website. You would only need gateway when you want to schedule it to refresh. Dataflow, however, because it is at the service even from the beginning. You need to get that connection through gateway even at the beginning, and it won't even let you to pass to the next stage. So I'll make sure that your gateway setup is correct before going to the next step. How scalable is Dataflow, meaning how many tables keeps it workable? It can be really scalable, but yeah, when we talk about the scalability, you need to also consider going premium, because then you will have extra compute power. You can enhance your compute engine to build it. When sharing paginated reports connected to the shared dataset, does user consuming the report in Power BI service need a certain permission to the shared dataset? Anyone who is going to use a shared dataset need to have a view access, at least a view access to that shared dataset. This can be done through the view access in the workspace itself, the contributor access and member access. Anything on top of that would also work. Even when you share this through app, when you publish a Power BI app, there's a checkbox that you can say people can use this dataset and build their own reports on top of it. That would also work. Another question, I understand that Dataflow can be used. Let me bring this slide up again just while I'm answering questions. I understand that Dataflow can be useful mainly when ETL solution or data warehouse are not available. Is there any other interesting situation where the best solution is to use Dataflow? So, yep, it is correct that it is good when you don't have ETL or data warehouse solution. Another good thing about that is that it is not a hardcore developer tool, right? Data warehouse or ETL is something that you need an ETL team, an ETL developer to go and build it. Dataflow is not like that. Dataflow is Power Query. Power Query is something that a Power BI developer can do that, right? So it makes it much simpler, I say. It's more for citizen BI developer compared to traditional BI developers. Apart from that, yes, you can use any other ETL solutions, Azure Data Factory, SSIS, Informatica. You can use whatever data warehouse technologies you like. Another question, do all entities within a data flow have to be refreshed on the same schedule? Yep, that is one of the reasons that we keep entities separately. If you want entities to be refreshed separately on a different schedule, then you put them in different data flows. But all entities within one data flow will be refreshed together. Where do data flow fit in the new composite model? That really doesn't have anything with the data flow, because composite model is talking about modeling. It's all about modeling layer. It's not about your data transformation layer. You still need your data transformation layer. Even if you are using some direct query sources, some live connection sources, you still have some of your import data table and they need some transformations. And that is where data flow comes in. Whenever you need a data transformation, data flow is coming as part of that. So composite model has nothing against it. Okay, thanks, Pretty, for the feedback link. I found limited functionality to the Pro license. A blocker use. Is full functionality available with Power BI embedded? With only a specific SKUs of embedded, not with EM1. I guess you can have it only with EM3 or 4 upwards, which is kind of very close to premium. So embedded, like lower SKUs, no. Premium would be the best option. Okay, what other questions? I'm just checking, is there any other? I think that's pretty much all of the questions. I see also Casper joined. Hey. Okay.
I think you've got them all. Thank you. Thank you ever so much for that, and for answering so many questions as well. Great, so many questions coming in. So thanks everybody as well. We've still got a lot of people on the call, so thanks for staying through the questions as well. Really, really interesting. If you want to catch up on or rewind and play back the session again, then we will be posting Reza's session on our YouTube channel. Hopefully you can see the link on the screen at the moment. And we're also pleased to announce that this won't be our last virtual meetup. Now we've got into the swing of hosting these again. Our next session will feature Chris Webb. I don't think Chris probably needs any kind of introduction, having been an MVP for many years before joining Microsoft. We will follow up very shortly with details of what Chris's session will be. Check out either on Meetup, our new website at londonpowerbi.com, or on Twitter, and we'll post the details very shortly. So thanks again, Reza, and thanks everyone for joining. Look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks, Preppy.
Thank you. Thank you, James, Preti, for the opportunity, and thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you, Reza, and thank you everyone, and thanks for the nice feedback. It's really nice to see, and we'll see you all at the next one. Thank you.
Yes, bye.
Bye.